In the peaceful Swedish countryside, where children still rode their bikes to school and neighbors left their doors unlocked, a crime so shocking occurred that it would forever change this idyllic community. This is the tragic story of Engla Höglund, a bright, kind-hearted 10-year-old girl whose life was brutally cut short, exposing the darkness that can lurk even in the safest of places. What began as an ordinary September day in the 2004 would become Sweden's most haunting child murder case, revealing police blunders, a killer's twisted lies, and a family's unimaginable grief. As we unravel this heartbreaking true crime story, you'll discover how one little girl's death transformed an entire nation's approach to child safety, and why her memory continues to resonate nearly 20 years later. Engla Höglund was born on June 20th, 1994, in the small Swedish village of Mötjärn, population just over 200 people. The daughter of Marie and Stefan Höglund, Engla grew up surrounded by dense forests and rolling farmland, the kind of place where children still played freely outdoors and neighbors knew each other by name. A bright, cheerful girl with blonde hair and blue eyes, Engla loved animals, especially horses, and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. She was known for her kind heart, often helping younger children at her small village school. This ordinary life in an idyllic Swedish countryside would make what happened next all the more shocking. Mötjärn was the sort of place where violent crime was almost unheard of. The biggest police cases in living memory involved stolen bicycles or the occasional drunk driver. Parents thought nothing of letting their children walk or bike alone through the village. Engla herself had made the short bicycle trip between her home and school countless times without incident. The Höglund family's biggest worries revolved around school grades and weekend plans, not the unthinkable possibility that their daughter might disappear in broad daylight. On the morning of September 10th, 2004, 10-year-old Engla ate breakfast with her parents as usual. She packed her school bag, kissed her mother goodbye, and set off for another day at Mötjärn Primary School. Classmates would later recall her cheerful mood that day. She had participated actively in lessons and played with friends during recess. At 2:30 p.m., Engla said goodbye to her teachers and classmates, mounted her blue bicycle, and began pedaling home along the familiar forest path she had traveled hundreds of times before. It was the last time anyone would see Engla alive. When Engla failed to return home by 3:30 p.m., her parents initially assumed she had stopped to play with friends. By 4 p.m., with no sign of their daughter and darkness approaching, Marie and Stefan Höglund began calling neighbors. By 5 p.m., with still no trace of Engla, they contacted local police. Officers initially treated it as a routine missing child case. In a village like Mötjärn, children often turned up at a friend's house or exploring in the woods. But as night fell and temperatures dropped, concern turned to genuine alarm. The first organized search party set out at dawn on September 11. Dozens of villagers combed the forests and fields along Engla's usual route home. Police brought in tracking dogs and a helicopter with thermal imaging equipment. Volunteers checked barns, sheds, and abandoned buildings. By afternoon, searchers made their first grim discovery. Engla's blue bicycle carefully leaned against a tree near a forest path, completely undamaged. Nearby, a single child sneaker, identified by Marie Höglund as her daughter's. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no obvious clues to explain what had happened. For 2 more days, the search continued in growing desperation. Hundreds of volunteers joined the effort, some traveling from neighboring towns. Police expanded the search radius to include nearby lakes and rivers. Then on September 13th, a volunteer searcher named Lars Anderson noticed something unusual. A patch of disturbed earth partially covered with pine branches in a dense thicket about 500 meters from where the bicycle was found. Moving closer, he saw a flash of pale skin. What he discovered underneath those branches would haunt him and all of Sweden forever. Engla's body lay carefully arranged on her side, almost as if sleeping. She was naked, her clothes missing. There were no visible wounds at first glance, but experienced officers immediately recognized signs of strangulation. The positioning of the body suggested the killer had taken time to arrange the scene. Forensic pathologists would later determine Engla had been sexually assaulted before being strangled to death. The lack of defensive wounds suggested she may have been taken by surprise or restrained quickly. Most chilling of all, the killer had clearly attempted to hide the body, but not well enough to prevent discovery. The autopsy revealed devastating details. Engla had died from manual strangulation, crushed by human hands. There was evidence of sexual assault, with DNA evidence recovered. Tiny scratches under her fingernails suggested she had briefly struggled against her attacker. The time of death was estimated to be within hours of her disappearance. She had likely been killed before her parents even realized she was missing. Most heartbreaking of all, analysis of her stomach contents showed she had eaten part of an apple shortly before death, likely a snack given to her by her killer. Police immediately launched a murder investigation, interviewing every adult male in the village and surrounding area. They collected voluntary DNA samples from dozens of local men. Boot prints found near the body suggested the killer wore size 44, US size 10, work boots, murders, common enough to be useless without other evidence. With no obvious suspects and no witnesses, the case began to stall. Then in a bizarre twist, Sweden's most notorious serial killer, already imprisoned for multiple murders, unexpectedly confessed to Engla's killing. Thomas Quick, the pseudonym used by Sture Bergwall, was Sweden's most infamous serial killer, a man who had confessed to over 30 murders while incarcerated in a psychiatric hospital. Now he claimed responsibility for Engla's death, providing disturbingly accurate details about the crime scene. Police initially took the confession seriously until forensic analysis proved Quick couldn't have committed the murder. He had been securely locked in a mental institution at the time of Engla's disappearance. The confession was just another of his many fabrications, wasting precious time and resources. With Quick's false confession debunked, police returned to their original suspect pool. In 2005, nearly a year after the murder, forensic scientists made a breakthrough. The DNA recovered from Engla's body was matched to a local man named Håkan Svensson, a 34-year-old construction worker who lived less than 2 kilometers from the crime scene. Svensson had been interviewed early in the investigation, but wasn't considered a prime suspect. Now, with this damning evidence, police moved quickly to arrest him. Håkan Svensson was no stranger to violence. Police records showed multiple complaints from ex-girlfriends about his explosive temper and physical abuse. Neighbors described him as a loner who drank heavily. Most damningly, Svensson had been seen near the crime scene around the time of Engla's disappearance, though he claimed to have been working. When confronted with the DNA evidence, Svensson first claimed consensual sex with an adult woman, a story that collapsed when scientists proved the DNA came from Engla's rape kit. Under intense interrogation, Svensson's story changed multiple times. First, he claimed he found Engla already dead. Then he said they had consensual sex, an impossible claim given her age. Finally, faced with overwhelming evidence, he broke down and confessed to seeing Engla biking alone, luring her into the woods with the promise of showing her a baby animal, then attacking her when she resisted his advances. He admitted to strangling her when she screamed, then hiding the body before returning home to his unsuspecting wife. The trial of Håkan Svensson began in early 2006. Prosecutors presented devastating evidence. The DNA match, Svensson's size 44 boots matching prints at the scene, his changing stories to police, and most chillingly, skin cells under Engla's fingernails that matched Svensson's DNA. The defense argued Svensson was mentally ill, but court-appointed psychiatrists found him fully competent. The Höglund family sat stoically through graphic testimony about their daughter's final moments, determined to see justice served. On March 15, 2006, the court delivered its verdict. Håkan Svensson was guilty of the rape and murder of Engla Höglund. He showed no emotion as he was sentenced to life imprisonment, Sweden's harshest penalty, though with the possibility of parole after 10 to 15 years. The judge called it one of the most brutal child murders in Swedish history. Outside the courthouse, Stefan Höglund told reporters, "No sentence will bring our Engla back, but we can sleep knowing her killer will never hurt another child." The aftermath of Engla's murder transformed Swedish law in the village of Mötjärn forever. Engla's law strengthened penalties for crimes against children and improved missing person response protocols. The case exposed flaws in Sweden's handling of serial confessors like Thomas Quick. In Mötjärn, the once trusting community became more cautious. Parents no longer let children roam unsupervised. A memorial stone was placed near Engla's school, engraved with her name and the words "Never Forgotten." Her grave, decorated with toys and flowers, became a pilgrimage site for those touched by her story. Håkan Svensson remains in prison today, having been denied early parole multiple times. Now in his 50s, he has never revealed his full motives or shown genuine remorse. Psychologists speculate Engla was simply an accessible target for his violent urges. The Höglund family eventually moved away from Mötjärn, unable to bear the constant reminders of their loss. They established a foundation in Engla's name to support child safety initiatives, turning their grief into a force for protection. Engla Höglund's story endures as both a cautionary tale and a symbol of lost innocence. Had she lived, she would be 30 years old today, perhaps a veterinarian as she dreamed, perhaps with children of her own. Instead, she remains forever frozen in time as the smiling 10-year-old in her school photos. The much shocking case, as it became known, shattered Sweden's illusion of safety in its rural communities. It serves as a grim reminder that evil can hide anywhere, even in the most idyllic settings, and that vigilance is the price we pay to protect the most vulnerable among us.